50 Cent's liquor company at the center of a legal battle.
Sunset Park hip-hop club Love and Lust is frequented by rapper, actor, and business mogul Curtis Jackson, better known as 50 Cent. The owner claims his club is the constant subject of inspections and is being unfairly targeted by the NYPD.
Who has more cred than you, living after being shot 9 times? Why'd the guy shoot you 9 times? Was it drugs or something?
He was paid to do it.
He was paid to do it?
Yeah.
Who would want to shoot you?
Why were you targeted?
You're such a good guy.
This is my past.
It was a drug thing?
No,
like a business thing?
It's karma.
For years, they called him Bulletproof. But behind the legend of 50 Cent, the man who survived 9 shots, was someone constantly being watched, not by the streets, but by law enforcement.
50 Cent put his 2 cents in on the situation in a tweet and in a now-deleted Instagram post, using the term "get the strap," meaning get the gun. That launched a threat investigation by the NYPD.
Buried in a classified dossier with a 500-page file tracking his every move, alliances, arrests, and whispered plots, federal agents mapped out connections between rap, drugs, and power.
The rep goes on to state, "Get the strap" is a playful phrase used by Mr. Jackson to punctuate absurd and outrageous situations.
This isn't just about fame or survival. It's about how Curtis Jackson became the target of both the streets and the system. The dossier and the target.
And we've actually done surveillance on rap groups. It was because of the protection of the actual group itself. For example, 50 Cent. It was followed around several times because of the fact that we felt he was in danger.
Before Curtis Jackson became 50 Cent, the corporate heavyweight and television producer, he was a target, a high-value target tracked by some of the most specialized law enforcement units in America. The information gathered on him wasn't stored in a single dusty file. It was part of a sprawling intelligence system.
The police know 50 Cent's running around with a bulletproof vest because they know what the issues are. They're just watching and hoping maybe we'll be stupid little animals and do something stupid and they could arrest everyone.
At the center of that system was the infamous New York Police Department's hip-hop surveillance dossier, a physical book that stretched 500 pages thick. Of that massive document, 24 pages were dedicated solely to Curtis Jackson. This wasn't a rap sheet. It was a blueprint of his life. Created by the NYPD's Specialized Rap Intelligence Unit, later renamed the Enterprise Operations Unit, the file contained details that went far beyond music. It included mugshots, incident reports, social security numbers, home addresses, vehicle registrations, FBI case numbers, and identification codes. This surveillance blurred the line between protection and prosecution. Detective Derek Parker, who founded the initial unit in 1999 as part of NYPD's Gang Intelligence Division, later confirmed that 50 Cent was followed on several occasions by officers. Parker claimed the intention wasn't necessarily to criminalize him, but to keep him alive. For his own safety, 50 Cent reportedly hired a substantial security team, often moving with armed guards around the clock. The file noted that 50 Cent was listed as a victim in 3 separate violent assaults. He had been shot, stabbed, punched, and struck with a tire iron.
What does it feel like to be shot? Is it a physical feeling?
Yeah, it doesn't hurt as much as people imagine it hurts because of your adrenaline and how the shock of what's actually going on. It hurts after.
Ironically, while he was filing police reports to survive, those same reports were being used to expand the intelligence case around him. The NYPD didn't keep that information within New York. They packaged it and shared it during 3-day hip-hop training sessions attended by law enforcement from across the United States, from Miami to Los Angeles. The thick black binder began with 50 Cent's profile and ended with his rival, Ja Rule.
Ja Rule and Irv Gotti, Black Child, possibly some other people, they run into him, and this big altercation happens. 50 gets cut, like in the arm or something like that. And essentially, when I interviewed Tony Yayo for the first time, when I said, oh, 50 Cent got stabbed, he's like, shut the fuck up, lad, you got a little scratch.
In between were artists like DMX, Jay-Z, and Busta Rhymes, each with their own section, their own data, their own paper trail. According to internal records, the purpose of these sessions was to help officers identify potential conflicts, track affiliations, and decode lyrics for signs of criminal activity.
Why is this person showing up repeatedly in this criminal's life? And until you eliminate that other person as an associate or part of the problem, that person's going to remain under surveillance.
You follow Puffy around, somebody who you know is a known killer. He visits Puffy. He goes home. You continue to follow Puffy.
The stated goal was to prevent violence before it happened. But critics saw it differently as a system built on racial profiling, where young black artists were studied like suspects instead of citizens. The 50 Cent file wasn't only about his music or his past. It was tied to a much larger framework, the High-Intensity Drug Areas Program. That connection meant the dossier didn't just involve the NYPD, it was linked to a network that included the DEA, FBI, and even the IRS. The idea was to monitor intersections between hip-hop, street organizations, and narcotics operations to track money, movement, and influence. For 50 Cent, it meant that every business meeting, every label extension, and every feud could be interpreted through a lens of suspicion. By 2003, when Get Rich or Die Trying turned him into a global icon, he had already spent nearly a decade under observation. He wasn't just a rapper breaking through, he was a figure emerging from a police database. To law enforcement, Curtis Jackson represented risk, a survivor of shootings, a known associate of street figures, and a man whose fame amplified his danger. This complex surveillance confirmed that 50 Cent lived in two worlds, one where the streets wanted him dead, and another where the system never stopped watching. What began as a supposed safety measure had evolved into something far deeper, a state-sponsored blueprint on the life of a man who refused to be broken. The hit list, Ghetto QU'RAN and Supreme McGriff. Long before federal agents began assembling their intelligence files, whispers on the streets of Queens already carried Curtis Jackson's name.
That nigga mouth run like a faucet. With all that loose mouth talk, that Ghetto QU'RAN. He's saying Preem was the businessman and Prince was the killer. All this shit, these is real names he named.
The reason, according to investigators, came down to one song, Ghetto QU'RAN, Forgive Me. The track, recorded in the late 1990s, was a raw, unfiltered chronicle of South Jamaica, Queens. It mentioned real names, real corners, and real histories that mirrored the operations of local drug organizations.
Curtis Jackson, you can call him what you want. I'm gonna call him by his name because I don't have no respect for the Curtis ain't the only out here snitching and ratting, you know what I'm saying? It's a bunch of them, man. The is a straight faggot, and I know because I came from out of that camp.
To fans, it was an autobiographical street confession. To law enforcement and those still active in the drug world, it was an open book.
Instead of actually giving information to the police, but some rappers will actually put in their lyrics to let us read between the lines and actually give us information so they're not known as a snitch.
In May 2000, the consequences of that song became violently clear. Outside his grandmother's home in Queens, 24-year-old Curtis Jackson was shot 9 times at close range. Miraculously, he survived. The attack transformed his public image from local rapper to street legend, but within federal files, it raised another kind of attention. Investigators from multiple agencies, including the IRS Criminal Investigation Division, suspected that the attempted murder was not random. They linked it directly to Kenneth Supreme McGriff, a convicted drug kingpin whose name was one of many woven through Ghetto QU'RAN. McGriff was the reputed founder of the Supreme Team, a powerful drug enterprise that dominated the crack trade in Baisley Park, Queens throughout the 1980s. His influence extended beyond the streets. It reached into the emerging world of hip-hop through long-standing connections with industry figures. Federal agents alleged that the shooting of 50 Cent was retribution for what McGriff and his associates saw as a public betrayal and a lyrical exposure of their past crimes and alliances. In their view, Ghetto QU'RAN crossed an invisible line between storytelling and snitching.
He mentioned basically all the Queens street legends.
Okay, yes.
He mentioned Supreme, Prince, Fat Cat, Pappy Mason, Gus Rivera, Bimmy, Chaz, Corley Wall, Vinny Ocean Palermo, who Tony Soprano is based on, Thomas Tony Montana Mickens, Rich Porter from Harlem, Alpo, Furtado Brothers, and E-Money Bags. Rest in peace.
Of course.
The founder between McGriff and Murder Inc. Records drew federal attention soon after. Irv Gotti, the label's founder, was a childhood friend of McGriff. In the early 2000s, federal prosecutors claimed McGriff had funneled drug money through the label, disguising it as legitimate business revenue. Court documents later described McGriff as the true owner of Murder Inc., while Irv Gotti served as the public face. Prosecutors accused the label of laundering over $1 million in narcotics proceeds through music and film ventures, including the 2001 crime drama Crime Partners. As part of the ongoing investigation, agents seized over 150,000 text messages from SkyTel pagers used by Murder Inc. employees. Within those messages, agents discovered real-time surveillance of 50 Cent's movements. One message from Christopher Lorenzo, Irv Gotti's brother, reportedly read, "50's in the hood, Guy R. Brewer." The reference pointed to Guy R. Brewer Boulevard, a major street running through McGriff's old territory in Queens. Federal affidavits interpreted this as proof that individuals connected to Murder Inc. were tracking Jackson's whereabouts and relaying information to McGriff. In another intercepted communication, McGriff allegedly referred to 50 Cent as a talking dry snitcher, meaning someone who exposed criminal business indirectly through public means such as lyrics. The threats against 50 Cent persisted long after the shooting. Federal agents noted that McGriff and his network continued to discuss potential retaliation. The artist himself acknowledged in later interviews that he lived under constant threat, which led to an extraordinary level of personnel security. By 2000, reports confirmed that 50 Cent was spending an estimated $20,000 per week, over $1 million per year, on private protection, including armed guards at his Connecticut residence. His security costs were higher than many corporate CEOs, reflecting the reality that his fame and his past could not be separated. Federal investigators questioned Jackson as part of their broader case against Murder Inc. and McGriff. According to records, he refused to give specific information about his shooting. When asked directly about who was responsible, he told investigators to read the lyrics. The statement was interpreted in different ways. Some viewed it as defiance, others as irony. Within the industry, it sparked rumors that 50 Cent had cooperated with law enforcement, though official documents and interviews later confirmed he did not provide any testimony against McGriff or the Gottis.
But because 50 wouldn't cooperate, we really didn't have anything to go by. So the case was solved. We never got credit for it.
The QU'RAN controversy represented more than a personal feud. It symbolized the tension between artistic expression and real criminal history. For law enforcement, it blurred the boundary between evidence and art. For those from the same neighborhoods, it blurred the line between storytelling and betrayal. 50 Cent's near-death experience in 2000 became both a turning point in his career and a focal point of federal surveillance efforts. His survival gave him fame. The song that nearly cost him his life became part of a federal affidavit. By the time the investigations concluded, McGriff was serving a life sentence for unrelated charges of murder conspiracy and drug. For 50 Cent, the events surrounding QU'RAN reshaped his public image forever. In the eyes of both the streets and the system, he had become more than a rapper. The Snitch paperwork, hit factory in the order of protection. In the aftermath of the Queens shooting, Curtis Jackson's recovery was not only physical, but reputational. As he rebuilt his body, he also began reconstructing his image, and with that came renewed scrutiny from rivals and law enforcement alike. The tension between 50 Cent and Murder Inc. records, which had already been brewing for years, soon escalated into one of hip-hop's most notorious rivalries. What began as a street-level dispute quickly evolved into a case study of how police documents and public perception could collide to shape a narrative of guilt, loyalty, and survival. The roots of the conflict stretched back to 1999, when an alleged robbery set off a chain reaction. According to multiple accounts, a friend of 50 Cent robbed Ja Rule for his chain in Queens.
One story is that 50 robbed Ja Rule's man for a watch or a chain or something like that.
No, Ja Rule got robbed by Troy from Baisley, this from the project, and 50 was cool with him, and that's how it kind of like all started.
Okay.
He see me kicking it with the robbed him, and he feel like, oh, I shouldn't speak to this dude because I know the kid robbed him.
Whether or not Jackson himself was involved remains disputed, but the incident planted a seed of hostility. From that point, 50 Cent and Ja Rule became open adversaries, exchanging diss tracks, public insults, and physical confrontations. For federal and local investigators already monitoring their circles, the feud presented a live case of how hip-hop rivalries could spill into real violence. One of the most pivotal confrontations occurred in March 2000 at the Hit Factory recording studios in New York City. The altercation involved members of Murder Inc., including rappers Ja Rule and Black Child, and left 50 Cent with a stab wound to the back and a partially collapsed lung. He required emergency treatment and several stitches to recover. Police reports from that day documented the event as a violent felony assault involving multiple participants. Black Child later admitted to stabbing 50 Cent, but claimed it was an act of self-defense.
It's like 5 of us and 5 of them in getting it on and fighting and bond some way, somehow. The lights got hit off, know what I mean? And I wasn't letting nobody get to their gun to pop me, know what I mean? So I started poking straight up and down.
Following the incident, the NYPD issued an order of protection naming Curtis Jackson as a complainant and listing Irv Gotti, his brother Chris Gotti, and Blackchild as defendants. The legal document cited charges including first-degree gang assault and first-degree assault. Its purpose was procedural, to prevent further contact between the involved parties during the ongoing investigation. However, the document contained one term that would haunt 50 Cent for years. It identified him as the informant. That single word became ammunition in one of the longest-running character attacks in hip-hop history. Rival figures within Murder Inc., including Irv Gotti, repeatedly shared copies of the document, framing it as evidence that 50 Cent had cooperated with police, a serious accusation in a culture where snitching carries permanent stigma. The image of 50 Cent's name beside the word informant circulated widely online and in interviews, reshaping the feud into a debate over credibility and authenticity. Legal experts later clarified that this interpretation was misleading. In New York police terminology, informant is a generic label used on reports to identify the victim or complainant who provided information necessary to initiate a criminal case. It does not denote a confidential informant or cooperating witness. Attorney Bradford Cohen, who represented multiple artists during this period, explained that such terminology was standard procedure and did not imply any formal cooperation with law enforcement. Moreover, the document listed several victims, each referred to in the same way, underscoring that the classification was bureaucratic, not incriminating. Still, the damage was done. The existence of that paperwork became a symbolic weapon in a rivalry already charged with emotion and violence. Within the rap community, perception often outweighed fact. To fans and detractors alike, the rumor of being an informant challenged the foundation of street credibility that had defined 50 Cent's early career. It turned bureaucracy into a tool of reputation warfare. Beyond the public spectacle, the order of protection also reflected the ongoing law enforcement interest in the conflict. By 2003, federal authorities had launched a broader investigation into Murder Inc. for alleged money laundering and racketeering. During that period, the label's Manhattan offices were raided by federal agents and bank accounts were temporarily frozen. Although the Gotti brothers were eventually acquitted, they later admitted that the investigation had drained resources and crippled their business relationships with Def Jam and Universal Music Group. Irv Gotti publicly blamed the federal probe and the feud with 50 Cent for the label's decline, describing it as the beginning of the end. Meanwhile, the street violence surrounding the rivalry intensified. In 2003, gunfire erupted outside the Manhattan offices of Violator Management, the agency representing 50 Cent at the time. Although no one was injured, early media reports linked the shooting to the ongoing feud. Police records show that while several individuals were questioned, no one was charged, and the case remains unsolved. For investigators, the pattern reinforced the perception that the hip-hop industry had become entangled with real criminal networks, a belief that continued to justify the surveillance programs that had begun years earlier.
We're talking about people that averages $10,000 to $15,000 4 or 5 days a week shooting at other people. These are people that make more than the average American who makes $30,000, $28,000 is the average American salary. These guys make that in 2-3 days and are shooting at each other.
Despite the persistent rumors, there is no public record of 50 Cent ever cooperating with law enforcement beyond the formal reporting of his assaults. His decision to maintain silence about his shooting and subsequent altercations likely stemmed from both personal caution and cultural code. Within hip-hop, silence could be interpreted as strength, a refusal to rely on the system for justice, even when the system was already watching.
Part of our problem with investigating violence within the rap industry is the lack of cooperation from the witnesses. Most of the witnesses are people within the rap industry, people who don't want to be known as giving information to the police. You know, your rap member has gotten hurt or killed, you'd want to cooperate with the police, but they don't.
The controversy surrounding the snitch paperwork remains one of the most misinterpreted episodes in 50 Cent's career. It demonstrated how easily legal documents can be taken out of context and how reputation can become as valuable and as fragile as life itself. What began as a routine procedural form evolved into a public trial of character, amplified by social media and industry rivalries. For law enforcement, it was another data point in a broader investigation. For 50 Cent, it was a reminder that in the eyes of both the streets and the system, survival meant constantly proving what side you stood on. He was a witness to an era of organized crime that hip-hop could no longer ignore. The wider war, Jam Master Jay and the hip-hop police state. By the early 2000s, what happened to 50 Cent was no longer an isolated story. It was part of a larger operation shaping how American law enforcement viewed the rap industry. In New York, that operation was known internally as the Rap Intelligence Unit, later rebranded as the Enterprise Operations Unit. Detective Derek Parker, who created it after the murders of Tupac Shakur and the Notorious B.I.G., described its goal as tracking patterns of violence around the music business.
My name is Derek Parker. I'm the retired detective from the NYPD. I started the rap and the hip-hop squad.
To his critics, it was a domestic surveillance experiment built on racial profiling. The unit's files eventually covered hundreds of artists, among them Jay-Z, DMX, Busta Rhymes, Fabulous, and 50 Cent. Officers compiled mugshots, license plate numbers, and tour itineraries, cross-referencing them with narcotics and gang databases. Through partnerships with the DEA, FBI, IRS, and the High Intensity Drug Areas program, hip-hop became part of the same intelligence pipeline used to monitor organized crime. Agents argued it was preventive policing. Many of the same individuals once connected to street organizations were now traveling with recording artists. Civil rights advocates countered that the system criminalized success stories emerging from poor black neighborhoods. The surveillance expanded after a string of violent incidents, most notably the 1997 killing of Christopher Wallace, known as the Notorious B.I.G. Unsolved and sensational, the case hardened police belief that music and gang culture were intertwined. By 2018, internal reviews show the NYPD database to be roughly 99% non-white. Its existence recalled earlier programs like COINTELPRO, which had targeted black political groups under the banner of public safety. To many journalists and scholars, the hip-hop police represented a modern echo of that logic. Within this climate, investigators reopened interest in a 2002 tragedy, the murder of Jam Master Jay, the legendary DJ of Run DMC. Jay, born Jason Mizell, had been both a mentor and early benefactor to 50 Cent, helping him record demos and navigate his first label contract. When Mizell was shot dead outside his Queens studio, rumors circulated that the killing was linked to narcotics disputes. Federal agents reviewing the Murder Inc. and McGriff files began testing another possibility, that Mizell's death intersected with a lingering vendetta against 50 Cent. The working theory, drawn from informant statements and phone record analysis, suggested that Kenneth Supreme McGriff had quietly blacklisted 50 Cent after Ghetto QU'RAN. Artists or executives who associated with him risked retaliation. Jam Master Jay, known for mentoring younger rappers regardless of politics, repeatedly ignored the warning. In affidavits later made public, investigators noted that 50 Cent declined to speak about his own shooting, but agreed to answer questions about Mizell's murder. No direct link was ever proven, yet the overlap between federal narcotics probes and the hip-hop community grew tighter each year. The investigation into Murder Inc. solidified the connection between entertainment and enforcement. In 2003, the label's founders, Irv and Chris Gotti, were indicted for laundering over $1 million in alleged McGriff drug proceeds. Prosecutors called McGriff the silent owner, claiming he invested his street fortune to finance films and music projects. After a 2-year trial, the brothers were acquitted, but McGriff himself received a life sentence in 2007 for racketeering, narcotics distribution, and murder conspiracy. The spectacle of federal aids and televised court coverage damaged the label beyond repair. Universal Music suspended funding, and Murder Inc. vacated its Manhattan offices soon after. For 50 Cent, the collapse of his rivals coincided with his own rise to corporate dominance. Yet even as he distanced himself from street disputes, the surveillance continued. Police still circulated internal alerts whenever he performed in New York. One 2016 email from a Brooklyn precinct sergeant to senior officers read, "Any plan being put in effect for 50 Cent appearing Thursday at Club Lust?" The question implied risk management, but its tone suggested ongoing suspicion. Despite public success as an entrepreneur and television producer, Curtis Jackson remained a name flagged inside law enforcement systems built decades earlier. The larger lesson of the hip-hop police era lies in its duality. On one hand, detectives like Parker argue the database saved lives by predicting conflicts before they turned deadly. On the other, its methods blurred artistic identity with criminal identity, turning performers into permanent subjects of surveillance. In practice, the monitoring neither stopped violence nor built trust. It institutionalized the assumption that every rapper was a potential case file. From that perspective, 50 Cent's story was never just about one artist under watch. It was about how an entire culture came to exist inside the lens of the state. Art versus evidence, the price of lyrics. The extensive files on 50 Cent revealed a troubling principle. In the eyes of prosecutors, a rap song could serve as both confession and motive. This idea, treating art as evidence, spread far beyond New York. Courts across the United States began introducing lyrics to argue criminal intent, blurring the line between expression and admission. One of the earliest and most striking examples was the case of McKinley Mac Phipps, a New Orleans rapper signed to Master P's No Limit Records. In 2001, Phipps was convicted of manslaughter for the shooting death of a fan at a Louisiana nightclub.
4 years ago, you were granted clemency from the governor of Louisiana after having served 21 years of a 30-year sentence for a crime you did not commit.
He had always maintained his innocence, but during trial, prosecutors built their case not on forensic evidence, but on verses from his albums. They quoted the alias, Camouflage Assassin, and presented lyrics about violence as literal threats. In closing arguments, the district attorney read a spliced line, "Murder, murder, kill, kill. You mess with me, you get a bullet in your brain." The words were taken from two separate songs rearranged for effect. The jury, mostly white and unfamiliar with rap vernacular, accepted them as proof of character. Phipps received a 30-year sentence. Years later, witnesses recanted. One security guard admitted he had been pressured by police to identify Phipps. Another man, Thomas Williams, confessed to the shooting, saying that Phipps had tried to stop the fight. Still, appeals failed for 2 decades. Civil rights lawyers cited the case as emblematic of a system that equated black creativity with criminality. Where heavy metal or country musicians could ascribe murder as metaphor, rappers were presumed to be documenting real crimes. Legal scholars trace the pattern back to cases like 50 Cent's, where federal investigators cited GHETTO QU'RAN in affidavits as a factual account of gang activity. The assumption was the same. Lyrical detail meant eyewitness testimony. This reasoning surfaced in the Young Thug RICO prosecution in Georgia, where 17 lyrics were deemed conditionally admissible to show that the label YSL was actually a gang. District Attorney Fannie Wills argued that the First Amendment does not shield admissions of crime simply because they rhyme. Critics countered that such use of art undermined free expression and ignored hip-hop's narrative tradition of dramatization and exaggeration. The debate has constitutional and racial dimensions. Studies from the University of Richmond and the ACLU show that prosecutors use rap lyrics as evidence almost exclusively against young Black and Latino defendants, even when similar violent imagery appears in other genres. The practice exploits unfamiliarity, jurors who interpret slang literally and view hyperbole as confession. Defense attorneys have begun calling expert witnesses to contextualize lyrics as artistic fiction, but outcomes remain inconsistent. Meanwhile, contemporary cases such as those involving New York drill artists Chef G and Fivio Foreign demonstrate how digital media extends the same logic. Prosecutors now cite music videos, Instagram captions, and text messages to connect artists to gang indictments. For law enforcement, these materials serve as corroboration. For defenders of artistic freedom, they illustrate an ongoing criminalization of culture. Through this lens, the 50 Cent dossier takes on new meaning. It was not merely a record of surveillance, it was an early blueprint for interpreting art as evidence. Every lyric about violence could trigger investigative interest. Every reference to real names could be logged in an intelligence database. The system viewed authenticity, a prized value in hip-hop, as potential self-incrimination. The cost of credibility became legal exposure. Over time, the backlash has inspired reform. In 2022, California enacted the Rap Lyrics Bill, AB 2799, restricting the use of artistic expression as evidence unless prosecutors can prove direct relevance. Similar legislation is under debate in New York and other states, yet the stigma persists. When juries still hear rhymes as reality, policy change alone cannot undo decades of perception. Curtis Jackson's survival from gunfire, from rivalries, and from federal scrutiny embodies the paradox at the heart of this story. His art mirrored his environment, and his success turned that reflection into profit. But to authorities, each verse remained potential testimony. The broader hip-hop community continues to wrestle with that contradiction. Culture built on truth-telling, judged by a system unwilling to see its metaphors. In the end, 50 Cent did more than outlive his enemies. He outlasted a framework determined to define him by the music that made him.